Ernests, take your floor.
So my job is to entertain you and hopefully give you something of value over the next 20-25 minutes. Before I sort of do that, one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to give a sort of the story of how to be successful. We've heard some of these in the past 68 meetups, and I don't necessarily buy into all of that. What I will do, though, is I will tell a little bit of my personal story of how we got to Edurio. A little bit about how we've grown it since then. I'll then talk about Horizon 2020. That's a European funding program which we received recently, and sort of can boost us in the sort of the next step of development. And then, because you can't do without it, I will try and give some tips from our experience, my experience, around something that could be of help for you. Before I do that, I'd like to learn a little bit more about you. So who is running a startup currently? Who is thinking about doing a startup that doesn't have one? Okay, who's here just for the beer? Good. Great. Okay, so it's actually a fairly equal split. The beer being, at least people claim they do less beer, but the total number of hands doesn't add up fully, so there's a shy bunch here. Okay, so a little bit about what we do at Edurio. So we've built a toolkit that helps schools very easily collect and analyze student feedback. What we want to do is we want to change the way schools approach their quality management. We think there's a lot of things that education systems and schools need to improve in, because we're changing the way we're managing quality. It's no longer about the grades, and we think we can do it better by asking those involved to tell how they feel or what they think should be done differently. To give you a quick idea, the school starts from creating questions in the system. They can use our research-based survey questions or create their own. The students, parents, and teachers then respond to the questions regularly via laptops, mobile devices, tablets, school IT labs, or what have you. And then the school and the teacher gets interactive results where they can explore the results in a meaningful way to them. So in a way that is sort of targeted around professional development plans of the teachers, around school development plans, around targeted feedback, for example, in bullying, where they want to improve the way they do things. Now, currently we're in about 200 schools, mainly in Latvia, but we're doing the first pilot in the UK at Eton College, which is the school that Princes Harry and William went, and most of the UK politicians. And we're working with a local authority in Finland, where we're trying to figure out, for them, as sort of the acclaimed leader of education, even they're trying to think about how they can fit into this new world where it's no longer just about the academic achievement. And we're trying to help them do that. This May, we crossed 3.5 million feedback questions answered mark. That's across over 150,000 surveys. That's sort of where I'll park it about what we do, because I don't want to sort of make it a very long and boring Edurio pitch. But what I will say is, because I want to sort of make sure I'm telling things that are valuable and interesting, if you have any questions or comments at any point, feel free to just raise your hand and to intervene in the middle of the speech. Don't wait till the end. I want to have a conversation. Now, that's sort of what it is. But I think the interesting story for those, especially who are thinking about something, is how we got there. And it started in Manchester, where I was studying this thing called decision sciences, which is something between statistics and modeling and management context. And as my coursework at the end of the 3 years, I did a project on student feedback. So analyze student feedback and how it relates to student assessment and student outcomes. And when I worked with the feedback forums, I sort of saw that there's a lot of really valuable information in it. But it was such a huge mess that for anyone to understand it without a statistics degree, they really had to either spend a lot of time, or usually it was impossible for them. So it wasn't a big surprise that the 10 years of feedback data that I analyzed weren't really used till then. They were collected, but they weren't used. And that's sort of, when I was finishing up my studies, I started thinking, okay, this is something that's really interesting. And that started back in 2010. That started to formulate into an idea. And I discussed it with Ernests, my classmate, who at the time was also living in London. And to be frank, at school we weren't very close with Ernests because I think he was a little bit too smart for me. But when we were in London, then we started sort of spending more time together and discussing ideas. And Ernests is a wonderful person to discuss ideas with because he gets incredibly excited about a very diverse set of things, as you can judge from his microscope and microscope supplies on one table and his synthesizer collection on another. So he's a person who will really want to dive deep into ideas. So we spent many evenings finishing up our studies, sort of talking through this idea. I mean, how could we do something that's valuable to the schools and help them collect feedback? And then we said, okay, let's try and do something about it. And what we did is, we said, okay, what do we need to do? We need to build a system, we need to allow the schools to collect feedback. We need a developer. None of us could develop. So we said, okay, where do we find a developer? Even back in 2010, that was sort of, the word on the street was that that's not very easy to do. And so I think we did something quite creative. We went to the school that we went to, so in my gymnasium, and we went to the IT teacher, and we said, who is your best developer? Who is somebody who is sort of doing something really cool? And she said, well, talk to Edgar's in the 10th grade. So we did. So we went and found Edgar's student in the 10th grade. We said, Edgar's, we're trying to build this thing. I've heard you're a fantastic developer. Can you help us with this? He was sort of, he had summer break, so he had some time. And we had the summer break because we had finished our university. He said, okay, yeah, I can do it. And I said, okay, well, you'd probably want some money for it. And I said, I probably would. How much do you think the development of this system might cost? And he was like, I think I can try and do it for 100 lats. And so we had a go at it. And we had a budget for 100 lats, and we created some initial wireframes. These are the actual wireframes of the system, and seems to be going well. We have some ideas. It got a little bit difficult when we realized we need this thing called server space. Server. And again, we tried to approach it creatively because we didn't want to spend too much. We didn't want to spend more than the 100 lats that we had already committed to the project. And so what we did is I went to the school again and said, you have a server. You have some spare space on the server that we could use. And after talking with the IT admin, we said, okay, you can. We're going to create an account for you. And so sort of, it was approaching August and we were a little bit delayed with some of these things. But then tragedy struck and the principal of the school found out that some random guys are doing something on the school server. And he said, I don't think that's a good idea. And so we're left without a server. At this point, we were really delayed with all the stuff. And And then I had to start working, and Edgar's went to his alpha camp where some Olympiad geniuses go, and Janis had to continue his studies. And so, okay, let's try another time. And yeah, unfortunately, it didn't work out with 100 Lats budget. We spent 3 months working at it. We didn't talk to any teachers, we didn't talk to any principals, but we thought we had something. Unfortunately, we didn't get there. Now, 200,000 later, we're still not there, but we're getting there. But it would have been nice if we had pulled it off with 100 Lat budget. Then I worked and joined McKinsey in strategy consultancy in London, which I spent 2 wonderful years in. My 2 most insightful or memorable experiences where I spent 3 days driving around in a shit truck, learning all there is to know about sewage treatment, and when I got to perform in a circus. So I did that for a couple of years, then I went into carbon credits, and then 2013 I moved back to Latvia. Initially did consulting, but then what happened is I met another Janis. There's always a Janis in every startup story, we have to. And I met Janis Gribus, who I played floorball together, and he's a front-end developer, and he spent his life in learning, because his family business is Lielvārds, who's one of the education publishers here in Latvia. So he led digital solutions for them, so he's worked with a lot of developers in creating the digital library and other ideas. And so once after a tennis game, we started discussing, sort of told about the story of our failed attempt to build a startup with 100 Lats budget and a wonderful idea. And this was in the showers, and so it was a little bit difficult to hear, but and he got quite excited about the idea, and he said, I think we can do this. And so that launched our second attempt at it, and this was early 2014. We again called up Edgars, who by that time was studying artificial intelligence and computer science in Edinburgh. And I said, Edgars, you have a summer break. Do you want to come spend the summer with us? He said, okay. I said, I'm going to spend some time. Janis, the other Janis, so we all got together during the summer. We got in touch with Edgars Ridziņš, my other classmate, who's a designer guru. If any of you need to do some serious design work, then you want to speak to Edgars. And we spent the summer in sort of this weird waves of productivity and discussions, and it was interesting because they were very creative people, and building a startup with creative people is a little bit frustrating for somebody who's into Excel and mathematics. And I remember one day when Janis and Edgars had been working the entire day on sort of pushing forward the idea, and I came in later in the afternoon, so around 5 p.m. And they were incredibly excited, and I entered the office, which was Edgars' office, and they'd been working the entire Saturday together because Edgars was working during the week. I said, oh, look, we've done this, we've sort of pushed forward into the next sort of step for Edurio. And he said, oh, what's the big news? We've chosen a font. Pluto Sans apparently is the most beautiful font in the world, specifically for Edurio needs. And we're actually stuck with the font, but they spent an entire day looking for a font that is perfect for us. Apparently we have it now. We spent most of the time working from my living room. We spent 1 week working from a shoe shop in Old Town, because that was the only place that had an air conditioner, because it was an incredibly hot summer. And so we found this shoe shop, which also had a table by the side, so we agreed that we could sit around there for a couple of days. And then what we did in the end of summer 2014 is we managed to get the soft loan from Imprimatur. And that was really based on the team that we had. Frustrating as it was working with creative people, we really managed to pull a team together that has sort of, I had the business experience, Janis had the sort of front-end development experience, Edgars back-end, the other Edgar's design, and then Yanis on analytics. So we sort of, nobody was of the same skill set. It wasn't me and my other Excel buddy. It was different people. And that was the thing that Imprimatur said, okay, this is interesting. You pull together these ideas. You have actually spoken with the schools, because by that time, all we were doing every week was talking to schools, talking to the municipalities, talking to the ministry. We even went and spoke to the unions, which everybody said, don't do, they're scary. But we did, and it was great. Everybody seemed to appreciate the need for better quality of education, and everybody seemed to be in broad alignment about how to do that. And so that gave us a sort of 1-year runway, because I was still living from some savings, and this is how we started building really. We started paying ourselves a little bit of survival salary, and we got the initial pilot clients, which again went from we went to do one presentation with the ministry for all the principals of gymnasiums in Latvia, which they invited us to do. And at the end of it, 16 schools signed up for the pilot. So we did our first pilots. And from there, it's been sort of really going step by step, increasing the number of schools. The second pilot was 50 schools. The third, when we sort of launched properly in December and started commercializing, was 200 schools. One thing that we did early on, which we went to Startup Sauna in Finland, again being probably the earliest team that was there, which meant a lot of the great things like talking to investors were a little bit premature for us. But the wonderful thing about Startup Sauna, if anyone's considering, especially in the autumn batch, is you go away for a month in Finland, which is the most dismal place on earth, during autumn, because the sun sets at 4 p.m. and it's pitch dark, and so you're together. And this was us together for the first time, away from sort of other responsibilities, really focused on the product and really needing to deliver week by week. And that sort of launched us in the sort of the next phase where we really started focusing on it. And then we had the second successful pilot. We were thinking about raising some money, and we did. And this was our convertible note round. We raised 230,000 euros from Imprimatur, again, from Alex, an angel investor from Australia, who coincidentally happened to be the founder of the company I worked for after McKinsey, Climate Bridge. And I put in some of my own savings. And this was one of the things I had started to realize, that in education, there's sort of 3 ways people say you can raise money, right? You can raise money on the traction. Let's say you have millions of users, you're wowing everybody. You can raise money on the technology. This is groundbreaking, patentable, next generation. Or you can raise the money on the team. In education, traction is very, very slow. In education, it's not about the technology, because a mentor of mine once told me that innovating in education is easy because you don't need to innovate. You can do what everybody else in business was doing 10 years ago. Because you're so slow in the convincing people to try new things in education, that it's not about the technology. You need to change the process. And so for us, it was always about the team and the people who invested in us at the time. Imprimatur had worked with us for a year through the softline program. Alex knew me personally for a few years and then met the team, and I knew the team. So it was our trust in the team that sort of gave us the next lifeline. At that time, we applied in Emerge Education, which was a UK education accelerator, and we built a headquarters out of the UK, so we established in the UK, which was the most painful admin month till now that I've had. And that's when we started looking at this thing called Horizon 2020 as a business. So it's an EU support program for SMEs, small medium enterprises, trying to fund groundbreaking, disruptive innovations and new products. We applied twice unsuccessfully, and the third application in April was quite critical for us, because considering that we're in education and we sort of had run out of people we know who are investors, it was either get a large grant, which we were hoping for with Horizon 2020 with the third application, or raise some money on a crappy valuation and basically build another lifeline for another 6 months or so. And at the time I was also preparing for my TEDx talk on education, and as I was going to one of the prep sessions, I was a little bit late, so I was running the elevator. I opened my phone and saw sort of 3 messages from the European Commission, and they were the most European congratulatory messages that I've ever received, and one of them was, please prepare a declaration of honor. One was starting preparation of grant agreement, and the other one was about validating your bank account. I didn't actually have time to read them, but I was like, okay, I think we might have gotten it, but I had to run into sessions and I had to start presenting, and so I then checked afterwards, and yes, we had been luckily awarded the funding. So we were awarded an EU grant of 1.86 million euros, and it's basically for the development of the platform and international validation. So taking a step back, Horizon 2020 have so much money because they don't invest in designers, clearly. Now, what the program is they have 2 phases. One is, who, by the way, here has heard of what Horizon 2020 is? Okay, good, so the majority of you is certain news. It's the big EU's way of trying to bridge the gap that America has in terms of venture capital funding. It's basically trying to say, okay, there are wonderful ideas, but there's the valley of death before they get commercialized. Because it's easy to get sort of initial investment, because you can get friends and crowdfunding and etc. But for high tech, you need a lot of investment to make it to the market. Once you start making money, you can go to investors, and that's easy. Now, in the US, there's sort of a different investment mentality, where they go, sell me your vision, right? The ones who've seen Silicon Valley, the show, or sort of read stuff by Y Combinator, and so you'll see that it's a slightly different mentality. You sell your vision. In Europe, the investment climate is a lot more, sell me your 3-year cash flow. Prove me your 3-year cash flow. And before you've commercialized, it's difficult to prove your 3-year cash flow. And so they're saying, we're going to create this new fund, invest a lot of money in R&D activities, so that's the early stage, but then we're going to carve out a little slice of 3 billion euros and put that into SMEs. And they have 2 phases. One is for early ideas where all of the ideas need to be pre-commercialization. All of the ideas need to have a pan-European impact. So Europe-wide impact, socially and financially. And it needs to be a genuine innovation. The first phase gives you a 50,000 euro grant, which funds a feasibility study. And by feasibility study, what they really mean is spend the money, give a piece of paper at the end. The second phase gives you between 500,000 and 2.5 million usually. The grant is to basically get you from prototype stage to scale up and get to market readiness. It doesn't fund commercial growth, it funds getting to market readiness. Which has a funny concept, because what that means is if you start commercializing, you don't get the full grant. So you're actually incentivized, in contrast to anything that the way investors work, you're incentivized to keep developing the product, grow traction, prove it, and get ready to for the market. Now, the other thing that's interesting here, that's different from other EU-funded programs, I mean, we all go EU bureaucracy, EU a lot of paperwork. It's actually quite fast. it's about a month and a half for the second phase, the big grant, and about 4 weeks for the first phase. So you submit, and then you sort of get to know whether you got it or not. The way the evaluations work is there's 4 evaluators who don't know each other, who don't know you. They're independent. They get, for the second phase, it's like a 50-page open form. Basically, you just write a proposal. For the first phase, it's a 10-pager. They get it, they read it quite quickly, and then they give a score across 20 different questions that, if you're considering that, I can share with you. And then you get a score. They take the best one and the worst one away. They take the middle 2, that's the median score. The best ones in Europe will get it. Now, it's a good system because it's not bureaucratic and it's not a tick box exercise, it's not academic, it's not technical, but it's also very sort of sketchy because the questions are bad, they're overlapping all the way. And so I've seen other companies who do this and they get like 12 points out of 15 and then they improve and resubmit to get 11. And you can't do much about it, but you can resubmit all the time. Now, it's probably the best EU program there is, but it's also not easy. And I personally put about 3 months full-time into writing the proposal. Writing, rewriting, improving, working with partners to give us letters of intent, etc. It's not a smaller task than raising a 2 million round. Right? So it's not like when you apply to Techstars or YC and everybody does it and just do the form in an evening. It doesn't quite work like that. So it does require a lot of time investment and understanding which question you're optimizing for the evaluation sheet, not the templates that they provide. So there's a lot of work around this. The couple of things that I think a good proposal needs to have. The main one is external validation. Everybody needs to be at the prototype stage. So you need to claim, everybody claims they have a prototype even if they don't really. But you need to claim you have a prototype. Best if you can demonstrate what you've been prototyping. If somebody else says it's a good idea, it's usually a lot better. Because the experts, and I'll explain why I use this a little bit later, but the experts usually have a fairly loose understanding of the subject area. So if you're working on a sort of augmented reality, an expert might be somebody who does something in the media or marketing, and they're usually consultants or managers or investors. And so you need to convince them on a different level. They're not experts, and they look for external validation. So we had letters of intent from the Municipality of Riga, from the Ministry of Latvia, Ministry of Education in Latvia, from Oxford University, Christ University College London, from ECUL in Estonia, and Tablet Academy in the UK, all saying it's a fantastic idea. There were some that said, we don't have the time. And I said, don't worry, I'll write it for you. And so collaboratively, we got to the right wording. I think the other thing that's different in this, because people are going to spend very little time on it, it really needs to be like a sort of, almost like marketing materials. It needs to be well written, it needs to be written in perfect English, clear, good spacing, illustrations, like you would a sort of brochure, rather than sort of a submission. That's I think the other thing to realize. Now, whether you want to do this or not, that's the sort of, the first question you have to ask is, does your idea qualify for is your ambition big enough for the program? Because the way they're positioning itself, you've got about like 500 applications and like 9 get it every call. So if you're going to say, I'm going to make 3 million euros annually, and then I'm going to create 5 new employment positions, that doesn't cut it. It sort of needs to be double-digit millions, it needs to be sort of 100 new workplaces. That's sort of what's interesting on a European level. It needs to be global ambition or European ambition. It can't be Latvian or Baltic ambition. So that's the first thing. Is your idea ambitious enough? Is it global enough? Can you justify that it is breakthrough or something that is sort of genuinely next generation? If you think you can, then it's not a bad idea. Because even if we hadn't gotten it, the materials that I'd written were very, very helpful. Because you know, when you work on an idea, you usually get sort of bogged down into the daily tasks of, for me, taking the trash out or sorting out accounting. And then you sort of forget to do the big thinking. But here you have to do the big thinking. On either 10 or 50 pages, you have to lay it out. And that's actually very, very helpful. So things like this, even if you don't get it, are a valuable thing to do. Now, do you want to go for the first phase or the second phase? Is another question. First phase, you still need to do most of the work. You need to write less. And you can get 50,000 euros. Your odds are slightly better, but not massively amazing either. The big one, I'd say if you feel you can get letters of intent from international partners, you can prove that you've validated this and you believe this is a breakthrough idea, it's probably better, time is better spent going after phase 2 than phase 1. Latvia is very much behind this, the other Baltics. So last time I checked, Lithuania had 5 successful applications, Estonia had 21 and Latvia had 2. Partially because we're sort of not really looking at ideas like this because we're scared of them. But when we are, it's usually sort of the folks I've spoken to, generally quite academic, not thinking as you would think when you present to an investor. And Estonia has a program where they really help people do this quite well. Now, for us, what are the next steps? One of the things is we're going to be working with the University College London Institute of Education, which is the top education research institute in the world, through this Horizon 2020 program, and work with international pilots. So we're talking to Uruguay, we're talking Estonia, we're talking to the ministry here in Latvia, a number of school networks in the UK and Finland, and try to get the next iteration of content, so the next iteration of areas of quality you may want to test, and then actually test them and validate them. The other thing, as the 1.86 million number suggests, is we'll be doing a little bit of hiring. So if you fit into one of these categories or others, and you think you're amazing, and you think you'd want to join an amazing team, then come and talk to me later. Now, that was my 5-second pitch. Now, because you can't go away without doing a little bit of advice, I find everybody, so when I moved from consulting into startups, there's one reason people love startups, because it's their opportunity to mentor them. Because before that, I had peer-to-peer discussions with people, exchanging opinions about management practices, and when you become a startup, there's a mentorship relationship where everybody says what you should be doing. And that's great, so now's my opportunity. And I was sort of thinking about a couple of things that have been helpful for me and the team in building Edurio to where we are, but also in getting the Horizon grant, because it has been a sort of year's worth of effort sort of distributed over time. One is what I call strategic opportunism. A lot of what happens in startups is very, very random. And so when the few things that were critical for us at Horizon 2020, one is we got a consultancy called Nordic Innovators from Denmark, who had successful projects, to look at the proposal and give us feedback on a success fee, so without a prepayment. The reason we got them was when I randomly applied to this thing called Seed Camp Week in London. We got through, spent a couple of weeks thinking whether we should go, went to the Seed Camp Week, It was a disaster. Had a few random conversations with people. One of the people, is it my time? One of the people I spoke to said, I know this guy called Henrik Kemp in Denmark. I think he was working for a consultancy, Nordic Innovators. You may want to check them out. I don't know what they do. So I typed it into my notebook, and then I checked it out later. I had a call with him. He said, we don't really have what would apply for the EU projects, but if we do later, then we should get back in touch. So a year later, I got back in touch. The other thing that was helpful was we got University College London Institute of Education to become sort of a subcontractor or partner for us. Again, when we were at Emerge, I said, okay, who's the best in academia? And UCL came top and said, who do we know here? And I asked people around and people connected me. I spoke to Diana at the UCL and she said, we don't really do this sort of stuff. But you can talk to Rose from the artificial intelligence team. They don't do that sort of stuff either, but Rose invited me to a networking event for academics and startups. So I went along to that, chatted some more with Rose, didn't get anything out of the event per se, but when we were looking at this, reached out again and said, this is a very specific opportunity. Would you like 240,000 euros if we are successful? You need to do one letter. I said, yes, please. And so we got their letter of intent, which was tremendously valuable. So it's sort of, a lot of you have spoken with, go with, should I be going to that conference or not? Will it be worth my time? I think it's most of the time, if you don't have anything better to do, it's worth going to sort of not saying no, if you can afford that. I try not to go to a lot of startup conferences. It's sort of a necessary evil to see your friends. But I try to go to education conferences. Went to an education show last January, met somebody from the Iceland Ministry of Education, and we're talking now. So it's sort of strategically looking for ideas where you'll have opportunities, expecting that most of the conference can give you nothing, but if you have a couple of conversations, that make it worthwhile, it's worthwhile. The second thing, creative persistence. Knowing what you want well in advance of getting it and approaching it creatively. Now, when I sort of said this about the experts, the other answer I could have given to how can you get a Horizon 2020 is to get a Horizon 2020, you have to be Horizon 2020. Now, when I came back to Latvia from the UK, I went to a seminar by the Development Investment Agency about Horizon 2020. It was one of those sort of opportunistic things. There's a seminar on some kind of random funding program, looks interesting. So I went and it was the traditional boring presentation. Then they start talking about experts, that they're always, that they have this new program, the way the experts work, you can apply. And so I said, okay, I'm in Latvia, Horizon looks kind of interesting, I'd like to learn more about it. So I applied as an expert, and I became one. And what that means is I've sort of seen about 100 of proposals. So I have a pretty good idea of what a good proposal is and what isn't. There were some amazing proposals at the beginning of Italian algae growers where they wanted to sort of, they had massively misunderstood the Horizon 2020 idea, and they sort of said, we think growing algae is the next big opportunity. We don't have anything yet, but give us some money, we'll get there. And that sort of led me through the process, and that's why if anyone's sort of seriously considering it, I'm happy to share some materials, happy to share my thoughts on some questions, and have a think about the idea together. And that was sort of, when we were writing one, it was tremendously helpful in sort of knowing how the program looks. The other example I can give to that is we wanted to speak to somebody at the OECD because they do education. And I wasn't sure about how to approach that, so I went to a conference, went up to the guy who speaks usually from the OECD on education, and said, love to learn more about what you do, this is sort of great. He said, okay, talk to Tua, he works in in this other measurement team. And then I tried to reach out to him, and we had a Skype chat, but it wasn't good connection. We said, okay, we'll keep in touch later. We'll maybe have something. And we had a few conversations, but it wasn't really going anywhere. And this was about sort of half a year in. And so what I did is send him an email and said, hey, I've got some meetings in Paris. Would you have time for tea while I'm there? I've got a bit of flexibility when I go there. Oh, yeah, okay, I can do that. Now, of course, I didn't have any meetings in Paris. I went there to meet him for tea, and we had tea, and we actually found that we have a lot of interesting things we could be looking at together. That resulted in me going to Education Leaders Forum in Helsinki, where I spoke with a number of ministries, etc. But this was sort of creatively approaching a thing that I was trying to combat. I did that again when I went to Estonia for a 1-hour meeting, sort of 9 hours of travel for 1-hour meeting, which gave us another letter of intent for the Horizon 2020 proposal. So it's not always that you have to sort of work on the big things and the admin things. Sometimes you have to go very specific. The final thing, and this is what we're about as a company, helping schools continuously improve. But I think that's personally something that I've held very valuable, and within the team, something that we aspire to all the time. So when I think, what's the most useful thing here at the TechHub Meetups? I think it's the pitch battle. Because that makes you get on the stage and in a risk-free environment, test your ideas and just randomly sort of try out presenting. When I used to be really uncomfortable at presenting, but then I went, and this was back in Manchester, I applied as a student representative where I had to regularly present to 400 people. And that made me really comfortable, but still, if I have an opportunity, I will try to go for the pitch battle because that helps me pitch better, and it's really a huge loss if you don't do that because it's a risk-free environment and you get a little bit better at what you do. In the team, we do regular feedback and try to grow together. That's my details. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions or want to chat afterwards, I'd love to meet you.
Thank you, Ernest. Great talk. So this is the part where you get to ask questions. Anybody?
Hi. I've been trying to find information as to how present are you in schools in Latvia?
We're in about 200 schools in Latvia, so we're in every school in Riga, and we work with a number of municipalities outside of Riga.
And is there any cooperation with E-Classe, or?
We're working on trying to do integrations because what we're doing through the program is, because Latvia was what got us to the project, then we're giving it away for Latvian schools for free and hoping to give them the opportunity to improve.
And how responsive are the Latvian teachers and principals towards this idea?
Surprisingly responsive. And that's the one thing that, what we did right the second time that we didn't do right the first time, is we spoke to everybody who would bother listening to us. And you see in press that everybody's combating and teachers are fighting the ministry and the ministry is fighting the unions. And so when you talk to them about actual education, people care. I mean, people care about giving the best education possible for our kids. And so I pitched Edurio at the pitch battle. That was my first thing. I didn't win that time. But the nice thing is when you get your word out there and test the idea with different people, you get a lot of different reactions. And for us, from the teachers, it's been very, very positive.
Some more?
Hi. How do you motivate the students to answer these questions in Edurio? Why do they spend their time answering those questions?
Because they have to. So usually schools will do that in the IT lab. The trick, of course, to motivate any kind of feedback is really the actions that come out of that. So we're now moving from the feedback towards the insights that help the schools take meaningful actions, because once you see that something has changed, you're a lot more willing to provide the feedback. The other thing that we do is we make the form very, very simple and fast to do. So we try to make it as hassle-free as possible. And that's helping a lot. So they can do it in like 5 minutes at the end of the lesson from their mobile devices or etc. So usually there's a sort of request from the school for them to do it, but then we try and make it as simple as possible.
Most answers you get from the IT classes or from students who do it at home or on the mobile phone?
Mostly they do it at school, either on mobile phones or IT clusters.
Have you received any payment for the pilots already?
Yes. So when we reached December 2015, so it's the last pilot, we started working with the local authorities on a commercial basis. So we have received initial revenues. Now moving for the next year or two, we will not be getting revenues in Latvia because we're giving away. But then there are various different models that we're experimenting.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good, thank you, Ernest.
Thank you.